This is the summary of Eldest, The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Bill. Disclaimer: this work is a summary and interpretation of Eldest by Christopher Paolini, created for educational and informational purposes. It is not intended to replace the original novel, nor does it capture every detail of Paolini's richly imagined world. Readers are encouraged to experience the full text to appreciate the depth of storytelling, characters, and themes as they were originally written. What follows is a companion piece designed to guide, reflect, and expand on the journey of Eldest, presenting a narrative that distills its lessons and emotional weight in a more concise form. Introduction. Every great journey begins with a single spark, and in Eldest, the second installment of Christopher Paolini's Inheritance Cycle, that spark has already erupted into fire. The story picks up in the aftermath of battle, when the dust of victory feels heavy with loss, and the promise of destiny is sharper than any sword. Eragon and Saphira, bound by their inseparable link as rider and dragon, find themselves thrust deeper into the storms of war and prophecy, where every decision will echo across the fractured land of Alagaësia. Yet Eldest is more than a continuation of conflict. It is a tale of growth, betrayal, loyalty, and the often painful steps required to carry the weight of destiny. Before moving forward, it is important to remember that what follows is a summary created for educational and interpretive purposes. This is not a substitute for Christopher Paolini's novel, nor can it replicate the full experience of his writing. Instead, it is a companion that draws out the essence of the story, reflecting on its pivotal events and emotional currents, while guiding the reader through the arc of its characters. For those who wish to experience every nuance of Paolini's world, the rhythm of his prose, the detail of his landscapes, the subtleties of his dialogue, the original book remains the truest path. Still, this retelling seeks to capture the living pulse of Eldest. It follows Eragon's training in the far lands of the elves, where discipline and wisdom demand a higher price than he ever imagined. It follows Roran, whose journey proves that even those without dragon or magic can rise to become forces of change. And it lingers on the choices that stretch between family and duty, freedom and allegiance, truth and deception. Here, the world of Alagaësia grows wider, darker, and richer. As every alliance is tested and every secret revealed brings with it a deeper cost. Chapter 1. A Twin Disaster. The opening of Eldest wastes no time in reminding the reader that victories often leave behind wounds deeper than defeats. Farthendur, once the impregnable stronghold of the dwarves, now lies heavy with the cost of battle. The Varden may have pushed back Galbatorix's forces, but the triumph feels hollow, steeped in exhaustion and grief. Eragon, still recovering from his own wounds after his clash with Durza the Shade, must confront the uneasy reality that war is never as simple as winning or losing. It is survival measured against the weight of sacrifice. The chapter's title, A Twin Disaster, carries with it a double meaning. On one level, it speaks to the physical destruction that remains after the battle, the broken bodies and shattered lives scattered throughout Farthendur. On another, it hints at the inner turmoil Eragon now faces, a fracture within himself as he begins to grasp the enormity of what lies ahead. Though he is celebrated as a hero, the young rider feels the strain of expectations pressing against his still fragile shoulders. For every cheer that greets him, there is also a quiet doubt whispering in his mind, reminding him of his inexperience and the mistakes he cannot afford to repeat. In this moment of uneasy calm, Paolini draws attention to the intricate politics that swirl in the wake of battle. The Varden, leaderless after the death of Ajihad, are forced to reorient themselves. Without Ajihad's steady hand, uncertainty gnaws at their fragile unity. Eragon watches as the Council of Elders begins maneuvering for control, their motives cloaked in speeches of loyalty, but edged with ambition. Already, the seeds of division are visible, and the young rider recognizes that his place in this struggle will never be neutral. His bond with Saphira sets him apart, making him both a symbol of hope and a pawn in games of power. The chapter also turns the reader's eye to the personal cost of violence. Murtagh, whose role in the first book lingered in the shadows of loyalty and doubt, is gone, captured by the enemy. His absence becomes one of the disasters referenced in the title, a wound in Eragon's circle of trust that cannot be easily closed. For Eragon, the loss is more than strategic. It is the painful reminder that no alliance is safe, no friendship beyond the reach of fate. The boy who once rode beside him has vanished into Galbatorix's grasp, and the silence of that absence echoes as loudly as the cries of the injured in the mountain halls. Even Saphira, the mighty dragon, is not untouched by the heaviness of the aftermath. Though her scales still gleam with the strength of battle, she feels the weight of Eragon's uncertainty and grief. Their bond makes his turmoil her own, and, in her fierce protectiveness, she reminds him that together they must endure. This balance, her fiery confidence against his fragile self-doubt, becomes one of the central dynamics of the chapter. It is through her that Eragon finds the courage to face what has been lost, though the questions about the road ahead remain unanswered. By the close of this first chapter, Eldest sets its tone with clarity. The story will not be a simple march of heroes toward triumph, but a struggle defined by loss, betrayal, and the tests of character that emerge in the spaces between battles. Eragon, though still young, is already confronted with the truth that being a rider is not merely about wielding magic or sword. It is about bearing the crushing weight of leadership when the world seems most uncertain. A twin disaster places him at the edge of a path that demands more than courage. It demands wisdom he has yet to discover, and sacrifices he cannot yet imagine. Chapter 2. The Council of Elders. In the aftermath of Ajihad's death, the Varden face a crisis that is as dangerous as any battle with Galbatorix's soldiers. Victory over the Shade and his forces has left behind a fragile silence. But silence can be just as perilous as the clash of swords. Power abhors a vacuum, and within the mountain halls of Trondheim, that vacuum quickly becomes a stage for intrigue. The Council of Elders, a small group of ambitious leaders, steps forward to seize authority, cloaking their maneuvering in the language of duty and stability. Yet beneath their polished words, Eragon senses the sharp edges of ambition. This council is composed of men and women who see themselves as guardians of the Varden's future, but in truth, they are as interested in control as they are in survival. With Ajihad gone, the possibility of chaos looms, and the council moves swiftly to position itself as the rightful successor. For Eragon, who has only just begun to understand the complexities of politics, this moment becomes a revelation. The battlefield may have ended in blood, but here, in shadowed chambers, power is contested with equal ferocity. The subtle glances, the veiled threats, the attempts to draw him into their orbit, each reminds him that he is not just a warrior, but a symbol they are eager to wield. At the heart of their calculation lies Naswada, Ajihad's daughter. The council recognizes that her claim to leadership is both natural and dangerous. On one hand, she carries her father's legacy and has the loyalty of many within the Varden. On the other hand, she is young, untested, and vulnerable to manipulation. Their solution is pragmatic, if ruthless. Elevate her to leadership, but bind her with their influence, ensuring she rules in name while they control in practice. It is a familiar pattern in the games of power. Place a figurehead on the throne and pull the strings from behind the curtain. Eragon finds himself caught in the middle of this shifting landscape. The elders appeal to him not as a soldier, but as a rider, reminding him of the authority his bond with Saphira gives him. They suggest alliances, hint at obligations, and press upon him the weight of responsibility. Yet Eragon, though inexperienced, feels the danger in their words. To align himself too closely with the council would mean compromising his independence. To oppose them would make him a target. His unease deepens when he realizes that every word he speaks, every silence he holds, is being weighed as a move in a larger game. Saphira, too, plays a vital role in this scene. She sees through the polished veneers with the clarity of dragon instincts, recognizing greed and ambition where humans attempt to disguise it as duty. Her presence gives Eragon strength, a reminder that his path cannot be dictated by political schemers. Still, the tension leaves him shaken. He has faced shades and armies, but the careful plotting of the council is a new battlefield. One where swords cannot cut through deception, and where the wrong choice might lead to ruin without a single blow being struck. The chapter closes with Naswada stepping into the role the council has prepared for her. Though they expect her to be pliant, her composure suggests otherwise. Eragon, watching her, sees not a pawn, but a young woman shaped by loss, carrying both grief and determination in her bearing. The council may think they have secured a puppet, but beneath Naswada's calm exterior lies a spark of independence that promises future conflict. Eragon feels a measure of relief, though he knows the coming days will test both of them. In the Council of Elders, Paolini shifts the focus of the story from battlefield to throne room, reminding readers that wars are fought not only with blades, but also with ambition, fear, and the hunger for control. For Eragon, the lesson is immediate. Power is rarely given freely, and those who claim to act for the good of all often act first for themselves. It is a truth he will need to remember, for his journey is only beginning, and the games of politics may prove as treacherous as any duel with sword or spell. Chapter 3. Truth Among Friends. Trust is fragile in the aftermath of upheaval, and this chapter shows how even the closest bonds can be strained under the weight of secrets. Eragon, still recovering from his injuries and shaken by the shifting politics around him, turns toward Arya, hoping that their shared trials will strengthen the understanding between them. Yet what he finds instead is the stubborn wall of her guarded silence, a barrier that leaves him both frustrated and confused. Arya remains enigmatic, her past veiled, her emotions tightly controlled. To Eragon, who feels the intensity of their bond and struggles to separate admiration from longing, her distance becomes a wound. He craves answers about her life among the elves, about her role in Alagaësia's tangled conflicts, about the feelings he believes might exist between them. But Arya offers little, her words measured and precise, her manner reminding him that not all truths are ready to be shared. Their exchange carries the sharp edge of disappointment, the rider reaching for closeness, and the elf insisting on boundaries. This tension is not only personal, it echoes the broader theme of the book. That understanding must be earned through patience, and that misplaced desire for certainty can fracture relationships. Arya's caution is not cruelty, but wisdom. She knows the dangers of attachments forged too quickly, the risks of vulnerability in a world where alliances shift like sand. For Eragon, however, the lesson is bitter. He must learn that trust cannot be demanded, nor can affection be forced by shared danger. Saphira, ever attuned to her rider's emotions, senses his turmoil and offers the blunt clarity of dragon thought. Her counsel reminds him that strength comes from discipline, not longing. In her steady presence, Eragon begins to see that the path of a rider demands control not only of magic and blade, but also of the heart. His feelings for Arya, though real, must not cloud his judgment or weaken his resolve. By the chapter's close, Eragon realizes that truth among friends is not always a matter of full disclosure, but of respect for silence. Arya's distance is not a rejection of friendship, but a declaration that some truths take time to reveal, and some burdens cannot yet be shared. The moment leaves Eragon chastened yet wiser, a small but important step in his growth. The boy who once rushed headlong into battles and emotions alike is beginning to glimpse the patience required of a leader. Chapter 4. Roran. While Eragon's path leads him into halls of power and uncertain alliances, the story now shifts to Carvajal, where his cousin Roran begins to face a battle of his own. Removed from the grandeur of riders and dragons, Roran's struggles are grounded in the soil of his village, yet no less vital to the fate of Alagaësia. His perspective provides a contrast to Eragon's journey. Here is a man without magic, without mythical bonds, relying instead on grit, loyalty, and the courage to defend home and kin. Roran's life, once simple and steady, is now overshadowed by the Empire's unrelenting grip. Galbatorix's forces have not forgotten Carvajal, nor the family tied to the young rider who defied them. Soldiers arrive with demands and threats, seeking to bend the village to their will, but Roran's response is shaped by both pride and fear. He knows that yielding would mean enslavement, yet resistance will invite destruction. In this crucible of impossible choices, his leadership begins to take form. The villagers, long accustomed to quiet lives, now look to him with expectation. It is not a role he sought, but Roran cannot escape it. His decisions will determine whether Carvajal survives or falls, and the burden weighs heavily upon him. The responsibility is complicated by personal stakes. His love for Katrina, the daughter of the local miller, binds his heart as firmly as his loyalty binds him to his people. To protect her, to protect all of them, he must find a strength that rivals any rider's, though his weapons are only a hammer and determination. This chapter illustrates how Paolini broadens the scope of the narrative, proving that heroism is not limited to Eragon alone. Roran's resistance shows that ordinary men, when pressed to their limits, can become symbols of defiance. His choices may lack the spectacle of dragon fire, but they are rooted in the same themes of sacrifice and loyalty that define the larger struggle. By grounding part of the story in Carvajal, the novel reminds us that wars are not fought only on distant plains. They ripple through villages, homes, and hearts. By its end, Roran emerges as more than Eragon's cousin or a background figure. He becomes a central force, his life intertwined with the larger war in ways neither he nor the villagers fully understand yet. Roran is a chapter of awakening. His transformation from blacksmith's son to reluctant leader has begun, and the storm gathering over Carvajal promises that his trials will be as fierce as Eragon's, though forged from the struggles of men rather than magic. Chapter 5. The Hunted Hunters. The quiet rhythm of Carvajal shatters as shadows lengthen over the village, and Roran finds that the hunters have themselves become prey. What begins as a routine attempt to provide food for their families twists into a desperate fight for survival, revealing that Galbatorix's reach is longer and more merciless than the villagers had believed. The Empire is no longer content with threats or demands. It now sends killers, and with them the unmistakable scent of blood. As Roran and the others move through the familiar forests, they discover they are being stalked. What once was their domain, the woods where they hunted game and shared stories by firelight, has become a battleground. The soldiers that track them are relentless, trained and armed, turning the hunters into quarry. In these tense moments, Roran's instincts sharpen. Every snapped twig, every shift of shadow becomes a warning. Every breath a reminder that survival requires more than courage. It demands cunning. The confrontation, when it comes, is swift and brutal. Steel flashes among the trees, and the stillness of the forest is broken by cries of violence. For Roran, the fight is more than survival. It is a revelation. He realizes that the Empire will not stop, that Carvajal's people are now targets, hunted as mercilessly as he himself. The death of even one villager at the Empire's hands becomes a wound to the entire community, proof that the days of peace are over. Yet amid the violence, a fire is kindled in Roran's heart. Where others might falter, he grows fiercer, refusing to be broken. Each clash with the Empire hardens him, shaping him into a leader not by choice, but by necessity. He sees in the eyes of his companions both fear and expectation, and he cannot shrink from either. His resolve deepens, his determination hardens. If the Empire is hunting them, then Carvajal must learn to fight, like those with nothing left to lose. This chapter underscores the central truth of Roran's arc, that ordinary people, when cornered, are capable of extraordinary resistance. The hunted hunters emerge from the forest not only with wounds and loss, but with a new understanding of their place in the war. They are no longer passive bystanders in a rider's tale. They are soldiers in their own right, bound together by blood, loss, and the unshakable will to defend what is theirs. The chase has begun, and with it, Carvajal steps fully into the fire of rebellion. Chapter 6. Saphira's Promise. Amid the chaos of war and the shifting tides of leadership, there remains a bond older and deeper than politics, the bond between Eragon and Saphira. In this chapter, that bond takes on a new weight, as Saphira offers a promise that is both comfort and burden, a vow that will shape the way Eragon faces the challenges ahead. Eragon, still weakened from the scars left by the Shade Durza and from the constant demands placed upon him, wrestles with doubt. His body betrays him in moments of weakness. His confidence falters when others look to him as a symbol of strength. For a young rider who only recently discovered his destiny, the expectations of the Varden and the elves feel like chains as much as they feel like honor. In the quiet moments, when his pain surges and his failures echo in his mind, he turns to the one being who knows him fully, Saphira. Saphira, bound to him by magic and soul, responds not with gentle consolation, but with the unwavering certainty of her kind. Her promise is simple and absolute. She will never leave him. Where he falters, she will be strong. Where he doubts, she will remind him of who he is. Where others abandon him, she will stand unshaken. It is not merely the loyalty of a dragon to her rider, but the declaration of an equal partner, one whose will is as fierce as her fire. Through her vow, Eragon finds the anchor he needs, the reminder that though he may stumble, he is never alone. The promise also speaks to the larger themes that pulse through Eldest. Loyalty, in this world of shifting allegiances and hidden betrayals, is rare and precious. While councils argue and soldiers defect, while friends keep secrets and enemies masquerade as allies, the bond between rider and dragon remains unbreakable. It is this constancy that gives Eragon the courage to continue. to face not only the battles of steel and sorcery, but also the internal wars that gnaw at his spirit. By the close of the chapter, the weight of Saphira's vow lingers in Eragon's heart. It does not erase his pain or solve the dilemmas that surround him, but it transforms his solitude into shared strength. Her promise is not just to shield him from despair, but to remind him that their destiny is intertwined. Whatever trials await, whether in the politics of the Varden, the mysteries of the elves, or the wrath of Galbatorix, they will endure them as one. In that certainty, Eragon finds the first glimmer of peace amid the storm. Chapter 7. Requiem. Grief has a way of settling over a people like a shroud, and in this chapter, the Varden and their allies pause amid the turmoil of war to mourn their fallen. The battle against Durza may have brought victory, but its cost is written in blood and ash. Requiem captures that moment when triumph feels hollow, when the weight of sacrifice presses down harder than the relief of survival. The cavernous halls of Farthendur echo with the somber rituals of farewell. Eragon moves among the mourners, feeling the sting of loss more keenly than the pride of battle. Ajihad, the leader who had guided the Varden with firm resolve, lies among the dead, and with him goes a sense of stability that the rebels cannot easily replace. Around him are countless others, soldiers, friends, nameless warriors, whose bodies tell the story of courage, but also of fragility. The dirges sung by dwarves and humans alike weave together a tapestry of sorrow that binds the survivors in shared mourning. For Eragon, the moment is deeply personal. Though Ajihad's death is a wound to the Varden's leadership, it is also a wound to his heart. He recalls the man's strength, his vision, and the trust he placed in a young rider still finding his footing. That trust now feels like a burden, one that Eragon is not sure he can carry. As he stands among the grieving, the truth strikes him with clarity. The war has only begun, and those he has already lost are but the first in a long line. Saphira, too, shares in the sorrow, her keen mind brushing against Eragon's with emotions both alien and familiar. Dragons do not mourn as humans do, but her grief is no less profound. She senses the impermanence of mortal lives, the frailty of allies, and the loneliness that will haunt them as they continue their path. Yet even in her sorrow, there is a fierce determination. She reminds Eragon that to honor the fallen is to continue the fight, to ensure their deaths are not in vain. The chapter closes not with the ringing of swords, but with silence, heavy and absolute. The requiem is not only for those who have passed, but for the innocence that has been lost, for the certainty that can never return. War has stripped away the illusions of youth, leaving in its place the somber understanding that every victory will carry the shadow of grief. For Eragon, the song of mourning becomes a vow to fight harder, to grow stronger, and to ensure that the sacrifice of the dead becomes the foundation for the living. Chapter 8. Fealty. With mourning still fresh in their hearts, the Varden turn from grief to duty. A leader has fallen, and now allegiance must be sworn anew. In fealty, the weight of loyalty and the meaning of oaths come to the forefront, showing that in times of upheaval, unity is forged not only on battlefields, but also in promises spoken aloud. Naswada, Ajihad's daughter, stands at the center of this moment. Young though she may be, her claim to leadership is undeniable, yet untested. Around her gather warriors, elders, and allies, each one measuring her not just by her bloodline, but by the steel of her resolve. For Eragon, the scene carries a double gravity. He is both a rider bound to the greater cause and a young man who has lost a guide. Now, he must decide where his loyalty lies, and whether to place his faith in Nasuada's unseasoned hands. The swearing of fealty is no empty ritual. It is a binding of lives to a cause, a declaration that those who remain will carry the fight forward together. One by one, voices rise in solemn pledge, their words echoing through the halls like a shield against despair. When Eragon steps forward, his vow is not only to Nasuada, but to the vision of freedom that has carried him this far. He speaks not as a boy from Carvajal, but as a rider whose destiny ties him to the survival of all races in Alagaësia. The moment steadies him, giving shape to his fractured sense of purpose. Saphira, too, participates, her presence lending a weight that no human oath could equal. Dragons are creatures of ancient memory, and her act of recognition signals to all that Nasuada's leadership is legitimate. Her loyalty, fierce and unshakable, bolsters Eragon's vow and cements the trust of those watching. In this union of words and spirit, the fragile threads of the Varden's future begin to weave into something stronger. Yet beneath the solemnity lies tension. Not all are eager to follow Nasuada, and whispers of doubt ripple in the shadows. Some wonder whether her youth will falter against Galbatorix's cunning, whether her resolve will withstand the crushing weight of war. The act of fealty, while binding, cannot erase ambition or silence dissent. It is a beginning, but not a guarantee. By the chapter's end, Eragon feels the first stirrings of stability returning to the Varden, even as he senses the dangers that lurk ahead. Fealty has been sworn, and with it comes both unity and obligation. For Eragon, the vow is a reminder that his choices are no longer his alone. He is tied to Nasuada's fate, to the cause of the Varden, and to the long road of sacrifice that stretches before them all. Chapter 9. A Sorceress, a Snake, and a Scroll. The corridors of Farthendur, once echoing with mourning and oaths of loyalty, now become the stage for something darker, the murmur of secrets and the scent of sorcery. In A Sorceress, a Snake, and a Scroll, Eragon encounters the dangerous undercurrents of power, knowledge twisted into traps, alliances veiled in mystery, and the subtle reminder that magic is never free of risk. It begins with his meeting of Triana, a sorceress of the Varden, whose presence is as alluring as it is unsettling. Skilled and ambitious, she represents a faction within the Varden's ranks, eager to assert influence, now that leadership has shifted. To Eragon, her words are slippery, coated in courtesy, yet edged with intent. She offers knowledge and assistance, but beneath her polished surface lies the unmistakable hunger for power. In her presence, Eragon feels the fine line between ally and manipulator, and he learns how charm can mask ambition as effectively as a blade hidden in velvet. The symbol of the snake, coiling and silent, threads through this encounter both literally and figuratively. The serpent becomes an emblem of deceit and the ever-present danger that lurks in the shadows of war. Just as a snake strikes when least expected, so too do political schemers within the Varden wait for their moment. Eragon realizes that not all battles will be fought with swords or spells. Many will be contests of words, trust, and cunning. Among these dangers, a scroll surfaces, bearing knowledge both precious and perilous. Written words hold immense power in Alagaësia, for they can unlock forgotten spells or unleash unintended catastrophes. The scroll represents both temptation and warning, a reminder that knowledge, when mishandled, can corrupt as easily as it enlightens. Eragon feels the pull of its secrets, but he also senses that each revelation may exact a price. This moment marks another step in his education, not in the arts of combat, but in the discipline of restraint. By the end of the chapter, Eragon emerges more wary, more attuned to the subtleties of those around him. He understands that sorceresses may smile even as they calculate, that snakes may coil unseen until the strike, and that scrolls may conceal as much as they reveal. The lesson lingers in his mind. Not every danger in war wears the face of an enemy. Sometimes it wears the guise of an ally. Chapter 10. Hrothgar's Gift. In the midst of uncertainty and shifting alliances, Eragon receives a gesture that speaks not only of gratitude, but of trust. Hrothgar's gift captures the solemn bond between rider and dwarf king, a moment where friendship transcends politics and where tradition is used to bestow honor as well as responsibility. King Hrothgar, stalwart leader of the dwarves, recognizes in Eragon more than a boy who stumbled into destiny. He sees a rider who fought to protect Farthendur, who bled alongside dwarves and humans alike, and who carries within him the burden of battles yet to come. In his court, with the weight of his people's eyes upon him, Hrothgar offers Eragon a gift meant to bind their fates together. The gift itself is not a trinket of gold nor a simple gesture of thanks. It is an heirloom of dwarven craft, a piece of history shaped by hands that have long since turned to dust, imbued with the skill and resilience of a people who have endured ages of hardship. Whether weapon, armor, or symbol, its weight in Eragon's hands is far heavier than its physical form. It carries with it the unspoken words, "You are one of us. You have earned a place in our struggle, and we claim you as ally and kin." For Eragon, humbled and still reeling from his own insecurities, the moment is both uplifting and daunting. The honor fills him with pride, yet it also deepens his awareness of the expectations placed upon him. A gift from a king is no mere token. It is a pledge of loyalty that demands reciprocity. By accepting it, Eragon acknowledges that he is no longer free to drift in search of his own path. He is bound to the Varden and the dwarves, tied by oath and symbol to a cause far greater than his personal trials. Saphira, ever perceptive, senses the depth of the occasion. To her, the gift is not only for Eragon, but for their shared bond, a recognition of their place in the tapestry of history. She feels the dignity of the dwarves' gesture, and her pride swells alongside Eragon's, her mind brushing his with a reminder that such honors must be borne with both humility and strength. The chapter closes with Eragon carrying the gift away, its presence a steady weight at his side. It is a beacon of friendship, a token of respect, and a reminder that his path is no longer his alone to choose. In accepting Hrothgar's gift, he has accepted the shared destiny of his allies and the responsibility to prove himself worthy of the faith they have placed in him. Chapter 11. Hammer and Tongs. The clang of iron upon iron fills this chapter, carrying the reader into the heart of dwarven craft and the raw strength that underpins their culture. Hammer and Tongs is not a tale of politics or councils, but of labor, skill, and the dignity of those who shape the bones of the earth into tools and weapons. Through it, Eragon witnesses a different kind of power, one not born of magic or dragon fire, but of calloused hands, patient strikes, and the rhythm of creation. The forge is alive with heat and light, a place where sparks dance like stars, and every hammer blow resounds like a heartbeat. Eragon, stepping into this world, is struck by the sheer artistry of the dwarves. Here, strength is not brutish, but precise, guided by years of tradition and a reverence for materials wrested from the mountains themselves. The dwarves work as though each strike is a prayer, each completed piece a hymn of devotion to their ancestors and their craft. Roran's world of survival and Eragon's world of rider's duty find a mirror here. Both are grounded in the need to build, to endure, to make something lasting out of hardship. Watching the dwarves, Eragon sees that battles are not won only on fields of war. They are prepared in the quiet intensity of workshops, in the sweat of those who forge the weapons others will carry. The rhythm of hammer and tongs is as vital to victory as the clash of swords. The dwarves, recognizing Eragon's role in their fate, extend to him the chance to understand their art. For a brief time, he feels the weight of the hammer in his own hands, tasting the discipline that comes from creation rather than destruction. The experience humbles him. It reminds him that his path, though wrapped in prophecy and grandeur, is still dependent on the labor of many. Behind every rider stands an army of unseen allies, the smiths, the builders, the nameless workers whose toil sustains the cause. By the chapter's end, the forge has left its mark on Eragon. He emerges with a deeper respect for the dwarves, not only as warriors, but as creators who embody resilience in every strike of their hammers. Hammer and tongs lingers as a reminder that true strength is not always found in battle. It is often found in the steady rhythm of those who build, who endure, and who craft the foundations upon which victories are won. Chapter 12. Retaliation. The shadow of the Empire looms ever larger over Carvajal, and in this chapter, the struggle shifts from defense to defiance. Retaliation marks the moment when Roran and the villagers, no longer willing to be passive victims, strike back against the forces that hunt them. The title itself carries the weight of desperation and fury as the people of a small mountain village rise against the might of Galbatorix's soldiers. The Empire's pressure has been relentless, each incursion tightening the noose around Carvajal. Families live in fear, children are hushed, and every knock on the door feels like the beginning of ruin. Roran, whose leadership has grown with each confrontation, sees that surrender means slavery, but resistance means blood. In that grim balance, he chooses defiance. His decision is not born of rashness, but of necessity. To protect Katrina, to protect his people, he must turn fear into fire. When the soldiers return, the villagers are ready. What the Empire expects to be another act of intimidation becomes instead a fierce counterattack. Men and women, bound by loyalty to one another, wield axes, hammers, and whatever tools they can grasp. Their blows may lack the elegance of trained swordsmen, but they strike with the force of desperation and unity. The clash is raw, chaotic, and bloody, yet it proves something vital: that the Empire can be resisted, that even the humblest of villages can bare its teeth. Roran himself becomes the heart of the retaliation. He fights not as one man, but as the embodiment of his people's rage and determination. Each swing of his hammer carries the weight of his love for Katrina and his refusal to bow to tyranny. In his defiance, the villagers see hope. In his resolve, they find courage. Though the skirmish does not end the threat, it sends a clear message: Carvajal will not go quietly. By the end of the chapter, the price of retaliation is clear. Blood stains the soil, and the villagers know that their defiance will only bring harsher retribution. Yet something irreversible has been kindled. Carvajal has shifted from prey to predator, from hunted to fighter. The Empire's grip has been challenged, and though the cost will be high, the villagers' spirit has been forged into something unbreakable. In their stand, small though it seems against the vast power of Galbatorix, they become a spark of rebellion that mirrors Eragon's struggle far away. Chapter 13. As Swelden Rak Anhuin. Deep within the halls of the dwarves, where stone walls whisper with the weight of centuries, Eragon encounters a faction whose loyalty to tradition borders on hostility. As Swelden Rak Anhuin, the Tears of Anhuin, is the name of a dwarven clan bound by rigid pride and an unyielding sense of heritage. In this chapter, the fragile bonds between allies are tested, and Eragon learns that even within those who fight against Galbatorix, divisions run deep. The clan receives him with formality, their words sharp and their eyes colder than the stone that surrounds them. To them, Eragon is not a savior or even an equal. He is a disruption, a rider whose presence recalls an ancient order that once wielded authority over dwarves without their consent. Old grudges linger in their gaze, and their disdain reminds Eragon that the past is never truly buried. Every alliance carries the scars of history, and the elves and riders, for all their glory, were not without fault. In their chamber, surrounded by the insignia of their house, Eragon feels both the weight of his destiny and the isolation it brings. He realizes that being a rider does not guarantee respect, and that his path will be fraught not only with battles against enemies, but also with the mistrust of those he calls allies. Their words bristle with accusation. He is young, untested, and tied to powers that the dwarves neither trust nor welcome. To them, he represents a future they did not choose, and they are unwilling to yield their pride to him. The encounter is a sobering lesson in politics and prejudice. For all the unity proclaimed among the Varden and their supporters, the truth is fractured. The clan's hostility underscores how fragile the resistance is, how easily ambition and resentment can splinter even those who share a common foe. Eragon, humbled but not defeated, sees that his role is not simply to fight battles with sword and magic, but to navigate the treacherous terrain of alliances, where a misstep in words can be as deadly as a wound in battle. Saphira, ever perceptive, senses the weight of their disdain and bristles with protective anger. Her presence alone is enough to silence some of their sharper tongues, for even in their distrust, they cannot ignore the majesty of a dragon. Yet even she cannot erase centuries of suspicion. What she does offer Eragon is clarity, that respect must be earned, not demanded, and that every heart he wins will strengthen their cause. By the chapter's close, Eragon carries away more than just the memory of hostility. He carries the awareness that unity is not a given, but a prize fought for with patience, wisdom, and endurance. As Swelden Rak Anhuin is less about confrontation than revelation. It teaches him that true leadership will require more than strength of arms. It will require the strength to heal old wounds, to bridge divides, and to inspire trust where none exists. Chapter 14. Selbadil. The journey of Eldest often carries Eragon from the roar of battles into quieter, more reflective spaces, and Selbadil unfolds in such a moment. The title itself, resonant with elven cadence, suggests both mystery and grace. In this chapter, Eragon encounters the enduring beauty of elven influence, subtle, almost hidden, while continuing to reckon with the weight of his own transformation. Selbadil is less a place of grandeur than of serenity. Nestled within the dwarven realm, it stands as a reminder that even in the midst of war, beauty and culture endure. Here, craftsmanship intertwines with elegance, arches carved with care, stone etched with flowing designs, and echoes of elven artistry woven into dwarven tradition. The space feels alive with memory, as if centuries of harmony between two peoples have left their signature in the very walls. For Eragon, weary from the constant press of conflict, the moment is almost a reprieve. a chance to breathe and to witness the quieter forces that bind nations together. In the stillness of Selbadil, Eragon finds himself reflecting on his own identity. He is no longer only the farm boy from Carvajal, yet he is not yet the rider of legend that others believe him to be. Like the hall itself, which bears traces of two different cultures, he too carries within him a merging of worlds, human roots, elven influence, and the destiny of the riders. The realization deepens his sense of responsibility, reminding him that he embodies not only his own choices, but the hopes of countless others. The chapter lingers on contrasts between the clang of forges and the hush of artistry, between the raw wounds of war and the enduring grace of beauty. Through it, Eragon begins to understand that strength is not measured only in combat, but also in the preservation of culture, memory, and spirit. The resilience of Carvajal, the traditions of the dwarves, the artistry of the elves, all these are forms of resistance against tyranny. Selbadil becomes, for him, a symbol of what is worth defending. By its close, Eragon carries from Selbadil more than admiration. He carries a renewed sense of purpose, grounded not just in duty, but in reverence. The place whispers to him that Alagaësia is not only a land of war and division, but also of harmony, and that his role as rider is to safeguard both. The chapter becomes a quiet turning point, a reminder that amid the storm of conflict, moments of peace are not luxuries, but necessities, anchors that keep hope alive. Chapter 15. Diamonds in the Night. Darkness cloaks the land, but within it glimmering moments of beauty remain. And in Diamonds in the Night, Eragon is reminded that even amid struggle, the world offers moments of quiet wonder. This chapter turns away from councils and politics to linger in reflection, bringing the vastness of Alagaësia down to something intimate and fleeting. A reminder that stars can guide as surely as any oath or sword. The night sky stretches wide above Eragon, jeweled with countless stars that shimmer like scattered diamonds. For a rider bound to destiny and shadowed by fear, the vision is both humbling and uplifting. He feels small beneath the endless heavens, yet in that smallness there is a strange strength. The constellations above whisper of eternity, of forces older than Galbatorix, older even than dragons. Against such a backdrop, his struggles become at once fleeting and profoundly meaningful. In this stillness, Eragon reflects on all that has happened. Ajihad's death, the burdens of loyalty, the sharp sting of Arya's distance, and the constant ache of his wounds. Yet the stars do not judge. They simply endure, shining as they always have. Their light reminds him that hope is not extinguished by darkness, that beauty exists even when sorrow clouds the heart. For Eragon, the night becomes a sanctuary, a place to steady himself before the battles to come. Saphira, beside him, feels the same pull of the heavens. Dragons have always been tied to the vastness of the skies, and for her, the stars are less mystery than kin, points of light that echo her own fire, her own eternal nature. Her presence turns Eragon's reflection outward. While he gazes upward in awe, she reminds him through their bond that he, too, is part of this greater design. The rider and dragon are not apart from the stars, but aligned with them, destined to leave their mark upon the tapestry of history. The chapter closes with quiet strength. Diamonds in the night do not erase fear or loss, but they remind Eragon that there is always light to be found, always a reason to endure. The image lingers as he rests, a sky vast and eternal, scattered with fire, promising that even in the darkest times, brilliance can guide the way. Chapter 16. Under a Darkling Sky. The heavens that once shimmered with quiet promise now shift into something foreboding. Under a Darkling Sky paints the world not in the brilliance of stars, but in the weight of gathering shadow. The chapter is steeped in unease, as though the very sky itself mirrors the tension coiling in the hearts of those who march toward an uncertain future. Eragon, already burdened by grief, obligation, and doubt, feels the atmosphere pressing down upon him. The air is heavy, the night no longer comforting but ominous, its vastness less a source of wonder than a reminder of how small and vulnerable he truly is. Clouds smother the starlight, swallowing the diamonds he had clung to in hope, leaving only darkness sprawling above. It is a sky that speaks of trials yet to come, a warning that the path ahead will be steep and merciless. In the company of allies, Eragon senses the same tension. Conversations grow muted, footsteps heavy, and eyes restless. Every man and woman under that darkling vault carries their own fears, of battles looming, of leaders untested, of an enemy whose strength seems boundless. Eragon, though young and uncertain, cannot help but notice how many look to him as a beacon. Yet how can he shine when the sky itself denies its light? This realization deepens his struggle. He must learn to stand tall, not only when the world is bright, but when it is cloaked in shadow. Saphira, by contrast, accepts the darkling sky with the poise of her kind. To her, the shifting heavens are not a threat, but a natural rhythm. Through their bond, she urges Eragon to recognize that even darkness has its place, that strength is found not in resisting the night, but in moving through it. Her steady wisdom reminds him that fear is only as binding as he allows it to be. While the sky grows heavier, her presence becomes the flame that steadies him against its weight. By the end of the chapter, the image of the darkling sky lingers as both warning and lesson. For Eragon, it is a reminder that destiny is not lived under gentle stars alone. There will be nights without light, times when hope feels smothered, and moments when courage is tested most cruelly. Yet even under a sky devoid of diamonds, he must press forward. The darkness is not the end, but the crucible in which strength is forged. Chapter 17. Down the Rushing Merewash. The story now sweeps away from halls of stone and skies heavy with foreboding, carrying us into the wild rush of nature's untamed force. Down the Rushing Merewash is a chapter of movement, urgency, and danger, where water becomes both path and peril, dragging Eragon and his companions into its relentless current. The Merewash is no gentle river. It roars with power, surging over rocks and twisting through narrow channels, a torrent that seems determined to remind mortals of their frailty. Eragon, who has faced blades and sorcery, finds himself humbled before the raw force of nature. Here, magic is not a weapon, but a shield, wielded not to conquer, but to survive. Every moment on the river is a test of endurance, of balance, and of trust. Trust in companions, trust in instinct, trust that destiny has not brought him this far, only to drown him in a flood. As their vessel careens through rapids, danger stalks at every bend. The waters slam against wood and flesh alike, throwing them off balance, threatening to shatter resolve as much as bone. The roar of the Merewash drowns out speech, leaving only shouted warnings and the unspoken unity that binds those who face death together. For Eragon, the experience is both terrifying and clarifying. Stripped of strategy and politics, survival becomes raw and immediate. Cling to life, cling to each other, and endure the storm. Saphira, unable to fully share their burden on the water, soars above, her mind brushing against Eragon's with fierce urgency. For her, the helplessness of watching him being tossed by the river is agony, yet she becomes his strength from the skies. Through their bond, she lends him courage, reminding him that they are never truly apart, even when nature itself tries to pull them under. Her shadow over the river becomes a silent promise. She will not let him be lost to the current. When at last the fury of the Mirwash relents, the survivors crawl from its grasp, battered but alive. The river has not claimed them, though it has taken its toll in exhaustion and fear. For Eragon, the ordeal is more than a brush with death. It is another reminder that destiny spares no one, and that the road ahead will offer as many natural trials as battles of men and magic. The river's voice fades behind them, but its lesson remains. Strength is not only the power to fight enemies, but the will to endure what cannot be fought. Chapter 18. Drifting. After the chaos and thunder of the Mirwash, drifting slows the pace, carrying Eragon into a space where time seems suspended, and thought takes precedence over action. The chapter feels almost dreamlike, a counterbalance to the violence of the river, as if fate itself has demanded a pause to let wounds, both seen and unseen, surface to the light. The current, though calmer now, still bears him forward with no heed for direction or choice. Eragon, weary in body and spirit, succumbs to its pull, letting the river dictate his path. In that surrender, his mind drifts as well. Memories rise unbidden, faces of those lost in battle, echoes of Ajihad's steady presence, Arya's distant words, Roran's fate back in Carvajal. Each thought is like a fragment caught in the current, tugging at him before vanishing into the depths. He feels at once isolated, and yet deeply bound to the world, as though the drifting itself mirrors his uncertain place in Alagaësia. The sensation is not wholly peaceful. There is unease in the drifting, a reminder that directionless movement is perilous. Without purpose, the river could carry him to safety, or to ruin. Eragon senses in his heart the danger of surrendering too long, of letting grief and doubt dissolve the will to steer his own course. Yet in the silence, there is also clarity. Freed for a moment from immediate demands, he glimpses the shape of his struggles, the weight of his bond with Saphira, the expectation of the Varden, the shadow of Galbatorix. These reflections, though heavy, are not without meaning. Saphira's voice, steady and grounding, reaches him even in his drifting. She reminds him that though currents may carry them, they are not powerless. Together, they can choose when to yield and when to resist. Her certainty steadies him, anchoring him against despair. Where he sees drifting as a loss of control, she reframes it as a chance to gather strength, to recover before the next storm. By the end of the chapter, Eragon emerges from his drifting not fully renewed, but more aware of the currents within himself. He recognizes that surrendering briefly to uncertainty is not failure. It is part of the journey. Yet he also knows that soon he must grasp the oars of destiny again and steer toward purpose. For now, the drifting has given him a fragile peace, a breath between trials, and a reminder that even aimless movement can carry lessons worth keeping. Chapter 19. Arya Svitkona. The story now turns its gaze more intently upon Arya, the elven ambassador whose presence has long been a mystery to Eragon. Arya Svitkona is a chapter that illuminates her not fully, but enough to remind both rider and reader that her strength is not merely an accessory to the Varden's cause. She is a force in her own right, steeped in wisdom, tempered by suffering, and cloaked in the quiet dignity of her people. Eragon's fascination with Arya has always been tinged with awe and uncertainty. To him, she is both an enigma and an anchor, a figure whose composure and skill seem unshakable even in the face of calamity. In this chapter, that impression deepens as he witnesses more of her character, the elven poise that conceals layers of resilience and pain. She carries herself with the weight of centuries of tradition, every movement deliberate, every word measured. Her presence a reminder of how different the elves are from the hurried lives of men. Through their exchanges, Eragon begins to glimpse the cost of that strength. Arya is not untouched by the tragedies that scar Alagaësia. Her silence about her past is not indifference, but a shield, an effort to protect wounds that even time and elven endurance have not fully healed. When she speaks, it is with clarity that cuts through Eragon's uncertainty, often leaving him humbled. Yet in her rare moments of openness, there is a vulnerability that stirs his empathy, even as her distance frustrates him. The title, Svitkona, is significant, for it acknowledges Arya not merely as a companion, but as a woman in her own right, an individual whose identity transcends her role in Eragon's story. To the elves, she is more than a diplomat. She is a warrior, a survivor, and a bearer of burdens that stretch far beyond the concerns of men. For Eragon, this recognition is both enlightening and chastening. It reminds him that his feelings for her, however deep, cannot define her path. She stands beside him not because of his longing, but because of her own commitment to her people and their cause. By the end of the chapter, Eragon's admiration has shifted into a more mature respect. Arya remains beyond his reach, yet not beyond his understanding. The glimpse he gains of her strength and sorrow steels his own resolve, teaching him that leadership requires not only courage, but restraint, not only passion, but patience. In Arya's presence, he is reminded that greatness often carries with it solitude, and that to walk beside such a person is both a gift and a challenge. Chapter 20. Cerys. The road bends once more, carrying Eragon deeper into the realm of the elves, and in Cerys the tone shifts from mourning and struggle to wonder. For the first time, Eragon beholds a true elven settlement, a place where the natural world and artistry of its people are woven together so seamlessly that the boundary between forest and home disappears. Cerys rises not with the harsh geometry of human cities, nor the stony permanence of dwarven halls, but with a living grace. Trees arch high overhead, their branches twined into shapes that form dwellings, walkways, and open halls. The elves have coaxed the forest into architecture, not by force, but by harmony, shaping wood and leaf into structures that breathe with life. To Eragon, it is as though he has stepped into a dream, an image of what civilization might be if it grew in rhythm with the land instead of against it. The elves themselves reflect this harmony. Their movements are quiet yet purposeful, their speech laced with music even in casual exchange. Eragon feels their eyes upon him, weighing not just his presence, but his spirit. For among the elves, respect is earned not by titles or victories, but by character. He is both guest and subject of scrutiny, a rider still unproven in their ancient eyes. Yet beneath the coolness of their observation lies a current of welcome, as if they, too, sense that his path is meant to entwine with theirs. For Eragon, Cerys is more than a village. It is a revelation. The beauty of the place awakens in him a deeper awareness of what is at stake in the war. This is not simply a battle for survival, but for the preservation of ways of life that embody balance, wisdom, and harmony. Galbatorix's tyranny threatens not only the freedom of men and dwarves, but the delicate relationship between the elves and the living world. Ceres shows Eragon a glimpse of what peace could look like, and the thought steels his resolve. Saphira, too, is entranced by the place. Though her bond is primarily with Eragon, she feels a kinship here, sensing that the elves hold a reverence for dragons that stretches back to ages long forgotten. Their respect feeds her pride, yet it also reassures her that she is not an outcast in a world that once nearly destroyed her kind. For both rider and dragon, Kyris becomes a sanctuary of hope, a reminder that there are still places untouched by war, still visions of beauty worth defending. The chapter closes with Eragon more aware than ever that his training among the elves is not only about power, it is about perspective, about learning to see the world through eyes that value balance as much as strength. Ceres is his first step into that broader vision, and it leaves him humbled, awed, and quietly determined. Chapter 21. Wounds of the Past. The serenity of Kyris cannot shield Eragon from the weight he carries within, and in Wounds of the Past, the scars of memory press against the fragile peace he has found. This chapter plunges into the ache of what lingers after battle, reminding him, and us, that wounds are not only carved into flesh, but etched into the spirit. Eragon's body, still crippled by the Shade's blow, becomes a constant reminder of his vulnerability. Pain seizes him in unexpected moments, breaking through pride and exposing the fragility that lies beneath the title of rider. In the presence of the elves, whose strength and beauty seem untouched by suffering, that weakness feels sharper, almost humiliating. He longs to stand as their equal, yet his twisted back and sudden seizures betray him, whispering that he may never rise above the limits the Shade left behind. But physical pain is only part of the burden. The memories of the battle, of Durza's eyes burning with malice, of Ajihad's death, of Murtagh's disappearance, return to him in restless waves. These are wounds of guilt and loss, festering in silence. Each thought gnaws at him. Could he have fought differently, chosen better, saved more lives? The questions offer no comfort, only deeper scars. He begins to see that while magic can mend the body, it cannot so easily heal the mind. Arya's presence sharpens these wounds in ways he does not expect. Her calm detachment, her subtle distance, remind him of the gulf between who he is and who he longs to be. In her strength, he sees his shortcomings. In her silence, the echo of things unsaid. Yet she is also proof that wounds can be borne with dignity. Her own past, though veiled, is heavy with scars, and she moves through the world without allowing them to define her. That realization sparks something in Eragon, a glimpse of resilience, of the possibility that scars need not be shackles. Saphira, ever his counterbalance, offers comfort laced with stern wisdom. Through their bond, she reminds him that the past cannot be unwritten, that to wallow in regret is to chain himself to what is already gone. Dragons, she insists, do not dwell on wounds. They endure them, grow around them, and let them shape new strength. Her counsel does not erase his pain, but it steadies him, guiding him toward the understanding that healing is not the absence of scars, but the will to rise despite them. By the close of the chapter, Eragon is left with no easy answers, only the certainty that his wounds, both past and present, are part of him now. They will not vanish, but they may yet teach him patience, resilience, and humility. In acknowledging them, he begins the slow work of transforming pain into wisdom. The past has wounded him deeply, but it has not destroyed him, and as long as he can endure, the path forward remains. Chapter 22. Wounds of the present. If the past haunts Eragon with regret, the present punishes him with pain. Wounds of the present brings his suffering into sharp focus, forcing him to confront the toll that battle has taken on his body, and the limitations that now threaten his role as rider. This chapter is not about memory or reflection. It is about the harsh reality of living with injury in a world that demands strength. The seizures come without warning, gripping Eragon in waves of agony that leave him gasping, trembling, and ashamed. Once, he could move with confidence, striking with sword and spell alike, but now, every day feels like a gamble. The Shade's final blow has carved weakness into his very spine, a reminder that even riders are not invincible. For Eragon, whose identity is now bound to destiny, the humiliation of frailty cuts as deep as the pain itself. How can he lead? How can he inspire when his own body betrays him? Among the elves, his suffering feels magnified. Their grace and strength only highlight his brokenness, and though they do not scorn him, he cannot help but feel inadequate. The gulf between what he is and what he must become yawns wider with each attack. The present wounds him not only physically but spiritually, whispering doubts that gnaw at his resolve. Perhaps he is not the hero Alagaësia needs. Perhaps the burden placed upon him will crush him before he can fulfill it. Arya witnesses his suffering, and though her manner remains reserved, her presence brings a measure of steadiness. She does not offer pity, for pity would wound him further, but her quiet attention affirms that he is not alone in his struggle. Through her, he learns that dignity can survive even in the midst of pain, that weakness need not erase worth. Saphira, bound to him in body and spirit, suffers alongside him. His agony flows into her, and hers into him, intertwining their torment. Yet where he despairs, she responds with ferocity. Her rage at his condition fuels her determination to protect him, to carry the weight when he cannot. To her, his weakness does not diminish him. It makes their bond all the more vital. She is not only his companion, but his shield, his balance, the strength where he falters. By the end of the chapter, Eragon accepts a grim truth. The wounds of the present will not vanish. He must learn to fight with them, not against them. His path will be more arduous than he imagined, but surrender is not an option. The pain that cripples him in moments is also the fire that will forge him, if only he can endure it. In facing the wounds of the present, he takes a step closer to the resilience he will need for the battles yet to come. Chapter 23. His Enemy's Face. There are moments in every warrior's journey when the enemy ceases to be an abstract shadow and becomes flesh and blood. His enemy's face is such a chapter, one that confronts Eragon with the sobering truth that behind the Empire's cruelty are men and women with faces, voices, and choices, however twisted or bound. The enemy is no longer distant, it is personal. Eragon's encounter begins not with the chaos of battle, but with the chilling stillness of recognition. He looks upon those who serve Galbatorix and realizes they are not faceless monsters, but individuals with eyes that mirror fear, rage, or resignation. For all their brutality, they are still human, or dwarf, or elf, each one caught in the web of tyranny. The realization unsettles him. It is easier to strike when the foe is faceless, harder when their humanity reflects back at you. Among them, one figure stands out, emblematic of the Empire's power. His face becomes etched into Eragon's memory, a visage he cannot shake, for it represents not only an enemy combatant, but also the embodiment of the oppression he has vowed to fight. To look into that face is to stare into the heart of the struggle, The conflict is not only swords against swords, but wills against wills, beliefs against beliefs. The encounter leaves Eragon shaken. He questions what separates him from his enemy, other than circumstance and choice. Could he, under different conditions, have worn the same grim expression, fought under the same banner? The thought disturbs him, blurring the line between good and evil, reminding him that the war is not a contest of clear-cut righteousness, but of convictions that demand sacrifice. Saphira's presence tempers his turmoil. Through her eyes, the matter is simpler. The enemy is one who threatens their bond, their people, their future. To her, hesitation is dangerous, for survival demands clarity. Yet even she understands the weight of his doubt, brushing his thoughts with reassurance that morality need not be clouded by reflection. The fact that he sees the humanity in his foes does not weaken him. It proves his heart is not hardened into cruelty. By the chapter's end, Eragon carries with him the haunting image of his enemy's face. It steels him even as it troubles him, a reminder that this war will demand not only strength, but discernment. He cannot afford to hate blindly, for hatred can corrode as surely as a wound. Instead, he must learn to fight with conviction, tempered by compassion. The enemy has a face now, and with it, the war becomes far more real. Chapter 24. Arrow to the Heart. War rarely spares the innocent, and an arrow to the heart, the brutality of conflict pierces far deeper than steel against steel. This chapter captures one of those moments when violence arrives suddenly, leaving grief in its wake, and Eragon is forced to reckon with the fragile line between survival and loss. The attack comes swiftly, as arrows often do, silent until the instant they strike. Amid movement and tension, a single shaft flies true, finding its mark in a way that shifts the entire course of the moment. The image of it lodging into flesh, the shock in the victim's eyes, burns itself into Eragon's memory. Death, though not new to him, feels different here, sharper, crueler, as though fate has chosen its target with deliberate malice. The one struck down is no nameless casualty. Their fall leaves a wound not only in Eragon's heart, but in the fragile fabric of those around him. The arrow becomes more than a weapon. It becomes a symbol of how swiftly life can be stolen, how suddenly bonds can be severed. Grief surges, mingled with fury, and Eragon feels again the bitter helplessness that has haunted him since Durza's blade carved weakness into his spine. For him, the arrow is also a reminder of his own limitations. Magic and strength may grant him power, but they cannot guard everyone, nor can they turn back death once it has found its mark. He feels the sting of failure, the weight of responsibility pressing heavier than ever. Each loss feeds his determination to grow stronger, yet also sharpens the fear that he may never be strong enough to protect those he loves. Saphira shares his anguish, her roar carrying both rage and sorrow. Through their bond, her grief amplifies his own, yet she steadies him with her presence. To her, the arrow is not only a tragedy, but a call to vigilance. She reminds him that their enemies will always strike at the heart, through loved ones, through allies, through the bonds that give meaning to their fight. To endure, they must be prepared to face such wounds again and again. The chapter closes with silence, heavy as stone, the image of the fallen imprinted on all who witnessed it. For Eragon, arrow to the heart is not just the loss of one life. It is the lesson that destiny exacts its price without mercy. Every step forward will demand sacrifice, and every victory will be scarred by grief. Yet within that pain flickers the resolve to press on, for to stop would be to let the arrow's shadow triumph over all they still hope to protect. Chapter 25. The Dagshellgar Invocation. There are moments in Eldest when the story pauses its march of battles and politics to touch something older, something sacred. The Dagshellgar Invocation is such a moment, a glimpse into the spiritual heart of the dwarves, where faith and tradition intertwine to give meaning to their struggles. For Eragon, it is both a lesson and a reminder that the war he fights is more than a clash of armies. It is a battle for the soul of Alagaësia itself. The dwarves gather in solemn reverence, their voices rising in an invocation that reaches back through centuries. The Dagshellgar, their holy day, is not marked by feasting or spectacle, but by ritual. Prayers carved into the stone, chants that reverberate in the caverns, torches burning with steady flames. In the deep halls, the sound of their devotion swells like a tide, ancient and immovable, a force that binds their people as tightly as blood. For Eragon, witnessing this ceremony is humbling. He has seen the power of steel and magic, but here he encounters a different kind of strength, the unity of belief. The dwarves' faith in their gods, their ancestors, and their destiny as a people infuses them with resilience. He realizes that this is why they endure, why they resist Galbatorix's tyranny with such ferocity. Their fight is not only for survival, but for the preservation of what is sacred. Saphira, too, feels the weight of the ritual. Her mind brushes against Eragon's with a reverence rare even for her. Dragons, ancient though they are, stand apart from the religions of men and dwarves, yet she recognizes the power of devotion when she sees it. To her, the invocation is not merely superstition, but a reminder that all beings seek meaning beyond themselves. The dwarves' gods may not be hers, but their strength in faith is undeniable. As the chants echo through the halls, Eragon reflects on his own path. What is his invocation? What belief sustains him when pain and doubt threaten to overwhelm? He has no ancient ritual to lean on, no centuries of tradition to steady his steps. Yet he realizes that his bond with Saphira, his loyalty to those he loves, and his determination to see Alagaësia free may serve as his own form of faith. It is not carved in stone or sung in ritual, but it is no less binding. The chapter closes in solemn quiet, the flames of the ceremony flickering against stone walls, casting shadows that seem to stretch back into history. The Dagshellgar invocation becomes more than a ritual. It becomes a reminder that war is fought with more than weapons. It is fought with memory, with belief, with the invisible threads that tie people to their past and push them toward their future. For Eragon, it is a glimpse of the kind of strength he must cultivate within himself if he is to endure. Chapter 26. The Pinewood City. The road now carries Eragon deeper into the elves' realm, and the Pinewood City offers one of the most breathtaking visions of their culture. If Caris was a whisper of harmony between civilization and nature, this city is a full chorus, vast, intricate, and alive with beauty that humbles even a rider. Here, Eragon witnesses what it means for a people to live not against the land, but as part of it, and the sight leaves an indelible mark on his spirit. The city rises among towering pines, their trunks stretching skyward like pillars holding up the heavens. Homes, bridges, and halls spiral around them, shaped from the living trees themselves, not cut or forced, but coaxed into form over centuries. Sunlight filters through the canopy in golden shafts, glinting on polished wood and woven vines. It is a place where the very air feels enchanted, heavy with song and memory. To walk its paths is to feel the pulse of life threaded into every stone and branch. Eragon, still carrying the pain of his wounds and the weight of his doubts, is struck silent by the sight. For the first time since his journey began, he understands fully the elves' reverence for balance and preservation. Their city is not a fortress built to defy the world, but a sanctuary grown from it. In this place, power does not roar. It hums quietly, steady and enduring, like the roots of the forest itself. The elves, graceful and poised, move through the city with the ease of those born to such harmony. Their gazes turn toward Eragon, some curious, others cool, measuring the rider against the legends they carry in memory. He feels their scrutiny and senses that respect here is not given for prophecy or power. It must be earned. Yet beneath their composure, he detects a flicker of welcome, as though they, too, recognize that his presence is part of something long foreseen. Saphira is entranced. The elves greet her with awe, bowing their heads in reverence, and she basks in their admiration with a pride that borders on joy. Among them, she does not feel like the last of her kind, an endangered remnant, but a living embodiment of an ancient bond. For her, the Pinewood City is not only a marvel, but a promise that dragons are still honored, still remembered, still woven into the very fabric of Alagaësia. For Eragon, the city becomes more than a marvel. It is a vision of what might be preserved if Galbatorix is defeated, and what will be lost if he prevails. The Pinewood City is proof that beauty and civilization can flourish without conquest, that strength need not mean domination. As he gazes upon it, awe gives way to resolve. His task is no longer about prophecy alone. It is about safeguarding wonders such as this, ensuring that the harmony of the elves is not smothered by tyranny. Chapter 27. Queen Islanzadi. At last, Eragon stands before the sovereign of the elves, and Queen Islanzadi marks one of the most pivotal encounters of his journey. The chapter brims with reverence and tension, for Islanzadi is not merely a ruler. She is the embodiment of elven wisdom, power, and endurance. To stand in her presence is to stand before centuries of history distilled into a single figure. The queen's arrival is unlike the formal processions of human courts. There is no gaudy display, no hollow grandeur, but rather a quiet majesty that radiates from her being. Tall and ageless, with eyes that seem to hold the memory of countless generations, Islanzadi carries herself with a grace that both humbles and unsettles Eragon. She is not just a leader. She is the living voice of her people, a bridge between the timeless forest and the fragile moment of the present. For Eragon, still wounded in body and uncertain of his worth, meeting Islanzadi is daunting. He expects judgment, perhaps even scorn, yet what he finds is a queen who looks past his scars to the truth of his heart. Her gaze cuts through his insecurities, stripping him bare, but not with cruelty. Instead, it is as if she weighs him not against what he has been, but against what he might yet become. In her eyes, he feels both small and significant, a single thread in the vast tapestry of Alagaësia, yet one destined to shape its pattern. The conversation between them is layered with gravity. Islanzadi does not flatter nor coddle. She speaks with the clarity of one who has seen empires rise and fall. She reminds Eragon that the riders were once both protectors and betrayers, and that his place among them is not guaranteed by fate alone. If he is to claim the mantle, he must embody its responsibilities with discipline and wisdom. For every gift destiny grants, it demands an equal measure of sacrifice. Saphira, however, is treated with reverence that borders on sacred. The elves bow their heads, their voices hushed in awe. For to them, a dragon is not merely a creature, but a living link to a golden age. Islanzadi herself addresses Saphira with respect, recognizing her as equal to any rider, perhaps even greater. This honor stirs pride in Saphira and steadies Eragon, reminding him that, whatever his doubts, he is bound to a being of undeniable majesty. By the end of the chapter, Eragon leaves the Queen's presence changed. Islanzadi has not handed him easy reassurance, but she has granted him something more valuable: recognition. She sees him as he is, flawed, uncertain, yet capable, and in doing so, she awakens in him a deeper resolve. Meeting the Queen does not lighten his burden, but it sharpens his purpose. He walks away, humbled, awed, and determined to grow into the rider she expects him to be. Chapter 28. Out of the Past. The forest holds many secrets, and in Out of the Past, Eragon finds that the weight of history is never far behind him. This chapter peels back layers of memory and revelation, reminding him, and us, that the struggles of the present are bound to the echoes of what has come before. To move forward, he must confront shadows that refuse to remain buried. The encounter begins with stories and recollections, fragments of truth long hidden by silence or blurred by time. Ancient wrongs, betrayals, and choices resurface, threading the current war to legacies centuries old. Eragon listens as tales of riders, elves, and men intertwine, each story sharpening his understanding of the burden he carries. He begins to see his place not as an isolated accident of fate, but as the continuation of a struggle woven deep into the fabric of Alagaësia. The revelations strike him with both clarity and unease. Some truths are painful, dredging up memories that others would prefer forgotten. Names once honored are tarnished. Actions once justified now appear as folly. To Eragon, it is a lesson in humility. Even heroes stumble. Even noble causes can cast long shadows. The past is not a flawless guide, but it is a stern teacher, and ignoring it courts disaster. Saphira responds to these truths with the steadiness of her kind. Dragons do not dwell on what cannot be changed. To her, the past is a stone already set. Yet even she senses the power of memory, the way old wounds can fester if left unacknowledged. Through their bond, she urges Eragon to learn what he can, but not to let the ghosts of history paralyze him. Wisdom, she reminds him, comes from knowing which lessons to carry and which to leave behind. For Eragon, the experience deepens his resolve. The sins of the past do not doom him, but they do warn him. He must walk carefully, aware that every decision he makes may ripple through generations yet to come. The chapter ends with him carrying the weight of these revelations like a newly sharpened blade. Dangerous, sobering, but also empowering. Out of the past comes a clearer vision of what must be done, and a reminder that destiny is never free of history's shadow. Chapter 29. Conviction. The revelations of the past weigh heavily on Eragon, yet in conviction he finds the strength to transform doubt into resolve. This chapter is about choosing a path, not because it is easy or certain, but because wavering is no longer an option. For the first time since his transformation into a rider, Eragon begins to grasp the clarity of purpose that has eluded him through grief, weakness, and confusion. The trials he has endured, his wounds, his failures, the skepticism of allies, the haunting memory of Ajihad's death, have pressed him to the edge of despair. But conviction does not spring from comfort. It grows in the soil of hardship. In quiet reflection, guided by the wisdom of those around him and the constant presence of Saphira, Eragon begins to see that destiny is not simply a burden laid upon his shoulders. It is a choice he must continually affirm. To turn away now would be betrayal, not only of others, but of himself. Saphira, sensing his shift, presses her strength into his spirit. Her pride in him is unshakable, her loyalty absolute, and through her bond, Eragon learns that conviction is not forged alone. It is strengthened by those who stand beside you, by the oaths you honor and the promises you refuse to break. For every moment of doubt, she is the counterbalance, reminding him of the unbreakable bond they share and the greater cause they serve. The elves, too, provide their own mirror. Their ageless discipline and harmony with the world inspire Eragon, showing him that conviction is not loud or reckless. It is steady, enduring, and certain. They embody a kind of certainty he longs to emulate, a purpose rooted not in ambition, but in the preservation of balance and life itself. In their presence, his wavering sharpens into something firmer, like a blade honed to a keener edge. By the close of the chapter, Eragon rises from doubt with a newfound sense of direction. He has not shed his pain, nor erased his scars, but he has learned to carry them differently. Conviction does not silence fear. It teaches him to act despite it. In this moment, Eragon accepts not only the destiny spoken over him, but his own choice to embrace it. What once felt like a chain now feels like a vow, a promise to himself, to Saphira, and to Alagaësia. Chapter 30. Repercussions. Every choice carries echoes, and in repercussions, Eragon begins to feel the weight of decisions already made. If conviction was about clarity and resolve, this chapter serves as its counterpoint, reminding him that certainty does not shield him from consequence. The world, vast and interconnected, responds to every action, sometimes with gratitude, sometimes with suspicion, and often with unintended costs. The repercussions come first in whispers, carried among the elves, the Varden, and others whose eyes watch Eragon with equal parts hope and doubt. His choices, whether to bind himself to Nasuada's leadership, to push against ancient traditions, or to wield his growing power, have shifted the delicate balance of alliances. Friends test his motives, skeptics question his readiness, and enemies use his every step as fuel for their schemes. What once seemed a straightforward path of honor now twists into a tangle of politics, trust, and hidden expectations. For Eragon, the scrutiny cuts deep. He is still learning to carry himself with confidence, still uncertain of his own strength, yet the ripples of his actions stretch far beyond what he intends. Every promise becomes a tether, every word a seed that might grow into loyalty or dissent. The burden reminds him of Ajihad's words, of the truth that leadership is as much about perception as about deeds. Saphira, ever steady, reacts with a mix of pride and frustration. To her, the murmurs of others are distractions, for what matters most is their bond and their shared purpose. Yet she, too, cannot ignore the consequences that circle them. She counsels Eragon to walk with dignity and patience, reminding him that those who bear power cannot hope to escape judgment. To be rider is to live in the light of constant scrutiny, to accept that every step will leave a trail. The chapter lingers on the tension between intention and outcome. Eragon learns that conviction alone is not enough. Wisdom lies in anticipating how actions will reverberate. The repercussions of his choices are not punishments, but lessons, pressing him to grow beyond the impulses of youth into the foresight of a true leader. By the end, the echoes of his decisions settle like ripples on a still lake, leaving Eragon with the sobering realization that destiny is not a solitary journey. Every choice binds others to him, and every misstep threatens to undo what he has sworn to protect. The repercussions remind him that the fight against Galbatorix will not be won by strength alone, but by understanding the delicate balance between choice and consequence. Chapter 31. Exodus. War spares no village, no hearth, no quiet corner of Alagaësia. In Exodus, the focus shifts once again to Carvajal, where Roran's struggle against the Empire reaches a breaking point. The villagers, long pushed to the edge by soldiers, threats, and bloodshed, can no longer cling to the hope of safety in their homes. What begins as survival hardens into resolve. If they are to live, they must leave everything behind. The decision is not made lightly. Carvajal is more than wood and stone. It is memory, lineage, the soil where generations have been born, labored, and buried. To abandon it is to sever themselves from their past, and for many, the thought feels like death itself. Yet the Empire's grip grows tighter, its brutality more unrelenting, and Roran knows that hesitation will doom them all. His voice rises above the murmurs of despair, not as a plea, but as a command. Their only chance is to flee together, bound as one, carrying their lives even if it means losing their homes. The Exodus unfolds with a mixture of sorrow and determination. Families gather what little they can, tools, food, keepsakes, while casting long, mournful looks at the houses they may never see again. The road ahead promises danger, but Roran's leadership binds them to courage. In his eyes, they find not only strength, but defiance, a promise that they are not helpless victims, but a people capable of shaping their own fate. His hammer becomes a symbol of that resolve, heavy with both fury and hope. The journey is perilous from the beginning. The villagers are untrained for flight, burdened by children and elders, harried by the fear of pursuit. Yet their unity makes them formidable. They move like a single body, each member carrying the weight of the others, determined to survive because surrender would mean annihilation. This collective act of resistance transforms them from farmers and smiths into refugees bound for legend. Through it all, Roran feels the sting of personal sacrifice. He leaves behind not just his home, but the memories tied to Katrina, the woman he loves, and the promise of a life that might have been. Yet it is his love for her, as much as his duty to his people, that drives him forward. Every mile of the Exodus is marked by both loss and hope, grief and determination. By the end of the chapter, Carvajal lies behind them, silent and forsaken, its smoke rising like a funeral pyre for the lives they once knew. Ahead lies only uncertainty, mountains, enemies, hunger, but also the possibility of freedom. Exodus is a chapter of transformation. A village becomes a wandering people, and a blacksmith's son becomes their leader. In their flight, the seeds of rebellion grow stronger, echoing Eragon's own journey and proving that resistance to tyranny is not the task of riders alone. Chapter 32. On the Crags of Tel Nair. The path of a rider is not only forged in battles, but in the quiet rigor of discipline and the majesty of ancient places. On the Crags of Tel Nair, Eragon arrives at one of the most sacred sites of the elven people, a place where time itself seems to linger, and where he must begin the deeper training that will test both his spirit and his bond with Saphira. The crags rise like a sentinel above the forest, jagged and enduring, their heights crowned by an ancient tree older than kingdoms, older perhaps than the memory of men. The journey to this place is arduous, but the elves' reverence for it is clear in every gesture, every word spoken in hushed tones. To them, Tel Nair is not merely geography. It is a living repository of wisdom, a place where riders once gathered, to hone their skills and bind themselves to the responsibilities of their order. Eragon feels the weight of history pressing on him as he steps upon the crags. Here, he is acutely aware of his youth and inexperience. The scars on his body ache, reminders of his vulnerability, even as the vastness of the place makes him feel small. Yet, there is also awe, for he senses that he is standing where legends once stood, breathing the same air, touching the same earth that bore the footsteps of riders whose names echo in song and tale. It is here that Aromas and Gliader, the hidden rider and his dragon, begin to unveil the depth of the training Eragon must undergo. Their words are not those of encouragement alone, but of discipline, caution, and clarity. Magic, swordsmanship, and the use of his mind all will be refined, sharpened, and tested. The crags themselves seem to echo their lessons, as though the very stones remember the struggles of those who came before. Saphira is deeply moved by the sight, her reverence clear. To her, Tel Nair is more than a training ground. It is a sanctuary of her kind, a place where dragons and riders once flourished in harmony. She feels kinship with the land, pride swelling within her, as though her very presence restores a fragment of what was lost. Through their bond, Eragon shares her awe, and together they draw strength from the sacredness of the place. By the end of the chapter, Eragon stands at the threshold of transformation. The crags, sharp and enduring, mirror the challenges ahead. His training will not smooth away his weaknesses gently, but cut into them, carve them into resilience, as stone is shaped by wind and rain. On the crags of Tel Nair is not a moment of triumph, but of preparation, a reminder that the greatness expected of him will demand sacrifice, patience, and a willingness to be remade. Chapter 33. The Secret Lives of Ants. Not every lesson of a rider comes wrapped in steel or cloaked in spells. In The Secret Lives of Ants, Eragon discovers that wisdom can spring from the smallest of creatures, and that the natural world, often overlooked, carries truths about power, unity, and survival as profound as any taught in halls of kings. Walking beneath the boughs of the elven forest, Eragon's attention is drawn to the tireless movement of ants. At first, they seem insignificant, tiny specks scurrying across the ground. But under Aromas's guidance, he begins to look closer. What he sees is not chaos, but a rhythm, an order born not of strength, but of cooperation. The ants labor ceaselessly, each bound to the whole, each life a thread in the tapestry of the colony. In their movements is a story of endurance and resilience written in miniature. The lesson humbles him. Eragon, who has been so consumed with the scale of his own destiny, dragons, riders, armies, and kings, finds perspective in the ants' silent persistence. Their strength lies not in the might of one, but in the unity of many. They are fragile alone, yet invincible together. For a rider tasked with uniting races torn by centuries of mistrust, the image becomes a mirror of his own burden. If ants can labor in harmony, why not humans, dwarves, elves, and dragons? The answer lies not in force, but in purpose. Saphira regards the lesson with both amusement and respect. To her, the ants are hardly worthy of attention, yet even she admits the wisdom in their example. Through her bond with Eragon, she teases him for finding kinship with insects, but beneath the humor lies acknowledgement. Greatness is not measured only in fire and might. Even the smallest lives teach the largest truths, if one has the patience to see them. The elves, too, embody this principle. Their way of life reflects the same harmony Eragon witnesses in the ants. Every action deliberate, every individual tied to the collective good. The lesson deepens his understanding of their strength, showing him that their power is not merely in their magic or longevity, but in their ability to live in balance. By the close of the chapter, Eragon carries with him a quiet revelation. The secret lives of ants are not secrets at all, but truths hidden in plain sight. To lead, to unite, to endure, he must learn to think as they do. Not of himself alone, but of the whole. The sight of their endless toil becomes etched in his mind, a reminder that destiny is not only about the clash of heroes, but also about the unseen labors that bind a people together. Chapter 34. Under the Manoa Tree. Few places in Alagaësia carry the same weight of mystery as the Manoa Tree. In Under the Manoa Tree, Eragon steps into a realm where the ancient and the living blur together, and where the forest itself seems to breathe with secrets older than memory. This chapter is not about battles or councils. It is about reverence, legacy, and the strange awareness that some beings are far larger than human comprehension. The Manoa Tree towers impossibly high, its trunk wide as a fortress, its roots delving so deep into the earth that they seem to anchor the world itself. Every leaf glimmers with vitality, every bough whispers with presence. To the elves, this tree is not merely wood and bark, but a guardian, an embodiment of history and power. Eragon, standing beneath its vast canopy, feels small in a way that even dragons and riders cannot prepare him for. He senses that this tree has seen empires rise and fall, has endured storms and silence, and yet still endures, timeless and watchful. Oromas explains that the Manoa Tree is no ordinary being. It is bound with magic, imbued with a consciousness that perceives those who pass beneath it. Legends swirl about its origins, some claiming it houses the soul of an ancient elf, others saying it was touched by spells so deep they changed its very nature. Whatever the truth, its presence is undeniable. Eragon feels its awareness brush against him, ancient and probing, as though weighing his worth. Saphira, ever attuned to matters of instinct and reverence, lowers her head in respect. For all her pride as a dragon, she recognizes the Manoa Tree as something not to be challenged, but honored. Through their bond, Eragon senses her awe, and it steadies his own unease. Together, rider and dragon acknowledge that this is a place where arrogance would be folly, where humility is the only fitting response. Beneath the branches, Eragon reflects on his journey. The scars on his body, the doubts in his heart, the burdens of destiny all feel smaller in the face of such enduring life. The tree reminds him that his struggles, though monumental to him, are but moments in the grand arc of history. Yet this does not diminish his importance. Rather, it situates him within a continuum, urging him to act wisely, for his choices will ripple outward just as the Manoa Tree has shaped centuries of elven life. By the end of the chapter, Eragon departs from the Manoa Tree changed, though he cannot fully articulate how. The encounter is less a lesson than an impression, a deep sense that he has touched something eternal. Under the Manoa Tree lingers like a quiet spell, reminding him that power does not always roar. It can also root itself silently in the earth, waiting, watching, enduring. Chapter 35. A Maze of Opposition. The path of destiny is rarely straight, and in a maze of opposition, Eragon learns that resistance does not always come from the battlefield. Sometimes it is found in councils, in whispered doubts, and in the subtle pressures of those who would shape him to their will. This chapter reveals the complexity of leadership, where progress is slowed not only by enemies, but by allies whose interests twist and tangle like vines in a labyrinth. Among the elves, Eragon expects unity, but what he encounters instead is debate and division. Ancient traditions clash with new realities, and though the elves honor him as a rider, not all are quick to trust or accept him. Some question his youth, others his human heritage, and still others his ability to bear the weight of responsibilities that once belonged to riders far greater than he. Every conversation feels like a test, every word weighed for weakness. What he faces is not open hostility, but a subtler resistance, a maze of politics, pride, and suspicion. Eragon struggles with the frustration of it. He is eager to learn, to strengthen himself, to prepare for the war looming over Alagaësia. Yet he is constantly slowed by arguments and the careful deliberation of those who see farther than he does. To him, it feels like an obstruction, as if he is being caught in a web that binds his urgency. Yet within this opposition lies a hard truth. Leadership is not only about swift action, but about navigating the complexities of others' wills. To unite people, he must learn to endure their resistance, to persuade rather than demand. Saphira, never one to suffer needless delays, chafes against the opposition. Her instincts are clear: act, strike, move forward. Yet even she begins to see the necessity of patience. Her bond with Eragon deepens as she steadies his anger, reminding him that strength is more than fire. It is also the ability to wait, to listen, to bend without breaking. Through her, he begins to accept that the maze, frustrating as it is, has lessons of its own. By the close of the chapter, Eragon realizes that opposition will be a constant companion, not only from enemies like Galbatorix, but also from those whose loyalty he needs most. The maze is not meant to trap him, but to teach him endurance, diplomacy, and the discipline to navigate the intricacies of power. The experience leaves him chastened yet wiser, more aware that the war he fights is not only with swords and magic, but with words, trust, and the delicate art of leadership. This has been the summary of Eldest, The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Bill.